Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident Podcast. It is a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. On this episode, we are joined by Sambaza, host and creator of the Sambaza Podcast. We've talked about, with some of our prior guests, the stigma of addressing your issues or your concerns with your mental health. And, especially in maybe the African American community, the stigma may be more prevalent than others. Did you see a disparity in, with what you work with, the people you worked with?
That's a great question. And while that stigma is very prevalent in the African American community, the prevalence is not exclusive to us. And I know, and that's the thing, right? That's one of the things I applaud the Meadows for allowing me to dive into that, because I say, listen, like in my community, I need to break through this idea that like therapy is for white people. Like I need to break through that. And I'm here to tell you, kiddos, that ain't true. Like in doing the research for Beyond Theory, you pull them CDC numbers and you see that like people from 65 up, who are, black men, 65 and up, are the fastest rising when it comes to fentanyl abuse, or like how it's affecting young people at a large rate from people who look like us. But the stigma of getting help, like I said, is exclusive to us. Oh, you're Catholic. No, you don't go to therapy. Oh, you're from the Midwest and white, from rural. No, you don't go get help. You work hard, you buckle that shit down, and you keep it moving, right? Like, oh, you're Asian. No. You work hard. You this and the other. Asian. That is that white people stuff. No, you don't do that. Or you're Native American. Like, no, like we come from strong people. We don't go to therapy. Like, no, that's not what happened. So, like that stigma, while it is prevalent to us, and we're in the Black community, so we know that's a thing, it's not exclusive to us. It's like everybody feels this stigma to get help for some reason.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident Podcast. Today, we have a special great show for you today. Our favorite co-host is in the house, Sambaza, host and creator of the Sambaza Podcast. He is a two-time nominee for Best African Diaspora Podcast by the APVA, and he is from the Republic of Kenya. He has been a presenter at the Afros and Audio Podcast Festival discussing Pan-Africanism, and he will be a ambassador at the 2024 Afros and Audio Podcast Festival. Hey, Sambaza.
Hey, what's up? How you doing today?
Good. I'm glad to have you here, and all of you guys. A really great show for you. We appreciate you guys for tuning in and catch this additional extra episode in the same week. So, bam! I'm definitely excited about what we've been doing this month and the prior month in acknowledgement of mental health awareness, and just really excited for another special guest to bring you today. So any thoughts, Sambaza, about our guest today?
And actually, I had referred them to one of my family members the other day when they were talking about one of their episodes regarding Memorial Day, and
okay,
he kind of liked it. So this is just a tidbit of what we're gonna have. So he's really good, and I'm anticipating a great show today. Always with him.
For sure. Definitely. And so we will go ahead and get started and introduce our next guest. So our next guest is a multiple award-winning podcast host. He has recently completed speaking engagements at the South by Southwest and the University of Memphis. He is a creator and host of the Black is America podcast. He had recently produced and launched the B Word podcast and has produced and hosts a behavior health podcast for 3 years. So many accomplishments this guest has completed, and we're just really pleased to have him join us today. Dominic Lawson.
What's up?
Welcome.
What's up? Thank you so much for having me. I am well. Thank you so much for having me. I think this is my second time on Woke by Accident, so I'm really appreciative of being on a second time. This is awesome.
For sure. We glad you were able to join us. So thank you. We appreciate that.
Of course, of course. Sorry, I'm coming in from a hotel boardroom right now because
Oh,
my wife has some training. So
okay.
hopefully I can keep the noise at a minimum. So, but I think we're gonna have a great conversation today.
Yes.
Definitely. Definitely. And before we get started, I'm definitely glad to bring this to our listeners today. We had a conversation that you thought it would be a great opportunity to share how storytelling can be impactful in regards to mental health. And so that is kind of our focus today. And really excited to have you here today about that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right. Let's get
So,
right into it. Now, Dominic, you have
Yes,
quite
sir.
the unique and impressive podcast origin story. You have actually amassed and won multiple awards, 23 now, and have created and contributed on multiple podcast shows, including one that focuses on behavioral health. Now, share with us how you manifest the intersection of storytelling and mental health and why it is important.
So when you think of the behavioral health journey, right? Many people are going through a lot of different things, especially as we've come out of the pandemic, right? And so one of the things that we know about people who go through mental health challenges is that isolation fuels it, right? Like feeling as this idea that like if I'm struggling, oh, nobody can relate to me. Nobody knows what I'm going through, right? And so we always try to convince people or have people share their stories, right? Because you just never know who may be out there who needs to hear your story. You may never know who's out there who can actually maybe help you with yours and what you have going on. And I think that's important when we talk about mental health, as this is, the waning days of Mental Health Awareness Month, and which is why I wanted to kind of come and talk to you about this thing because it's really important to me. It's really important to my work with two podcasts that I do in that space. And so storytelling, and sharing your story and your testimony, it goes hand in hand. Not only is it beneficial, like I said, for the person who may listen to it, it could be beneficial for you because I think when you're able to share your story and you're able to share other people's stories, you feel more empowered because I think a lot of the things when it comes to storytelling is that the person who's telling the story owns the narrative, right? And so if you're able to own the narrative, you're able to hold that power and use that power for good. Sometimes people use it for evil, but you can use that power for good, not just for yourself, but for others around you. So it's really important.
okay. And then let's talk about the different types of storytelling. You mentioned narrative. There's also some other types, digital storytelling. I mean, you mentioned the pandemic, and a lot of people decided to like kind of capture and do these type of journal. And that's storytelling. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, share about the different types and if one, you know, has a positive influence on mental health in particular with the different types.
I think I don't know if one has one more more influence than the other or is better than the other one. I think it's a matter of something my wife talks about when she's teaching or whatever. You got to meet people where they are to get them to where they're going, right? And I think sometimes for some people that may be through social media, for some that may be through podcasting, for some it may be through going to alumni events with other people in AA meetings and sharing your story there, right? So I think it's important to know that it depends on what that person looks like. Like recovery and people who going through or coming out the other side of mental health challenges, it really is like a cloud or a four-leaf clover. No two are the same, right? And so whatever that looks like, you should engage that. And I think it's important for people to try different mediums, right? Maybe it is digital storytelling on social media. Maybe it's in podcast form. Maybe it's going through going to your local church and sharing your story there, going to a local youth organization or something and sharing your story there. I have a good friend of mine, Chuck Hippa, who's been in recovery for at least 10 plus years now. And he's turned his power of recovery into motivational speaking and speaking to sports teams and youth groups. And, I know he's like deeply grounded in his Christian faith and speaking to church groups and stuff like that. So, again, I don't know, especially coming from people of color, I don't know nothing more powerful than a testimony, right? We always hear about, bring your testimony and lay your burdens down and stuff like that. And there's something to be said about, sharing what you're going through with somebody else. Obviously, somebody who is safe and responsible, who is mature enough to have that and not weaponize that against you, right? Because that's work in itself, right? Because we know people will do that. But there's something about laying that burden down with somebody that you trust that can be impactful, not just for yourself, like I said, but also the person you're sharing with, right? And it provides that context that they probably, didn't have before. I know one of the things, especially when it comes to like people who are grieving, right? I think a lot of times, and this goes back, Jen, to your question about the different types of storytelling, like people who grieve, we all grieve differently. Some people cry it out. Some people, do other things. We have this phrase in the behavioral health space, grieve as you live. Meaning that, like, if you are a person who loves to bake pies, when you're grieving, you're probably going to make 1,000 pies. If you are a person who likes to knit, you're probably going to knit a whole bunch of scarves and hats and stuff like that. Like that's part of the grieving process. So just like grieving doesn't look the same for everybody else, telling your story shouldn't look the same for everybody else, or what your recovery looks like won't look the same for everybody else as well. Because like I said, some people, when it comes to recovery, they go talk to a therapist. Other people have to go through, intensive inpatient networks. Some people can just go to an AA meeting. Some people can figure it out on their own, right? I think sometimes we think that, we have to go talk to somebody and this and the other. And, I would always suggest that you do. But if you're able to figure it out on your own as well, there are times where you're able to do that. Now, obviously, if you're like real acute and something like that, like you really have a real bad drinking problem, maybe you should go talk to somebody. But sometimes mental health issues aren't something as strong as those things. It could be just something like, hey, I just feel down, right? And those things that can trigger you to feel down and be depressive. And maybe you just need to go out in the sun for a couple hours, and maybe that helps, and maybe it doesn't. Right. So I guess I say all of that to say that, like, everybody should figure out what works for them. Recovery or going through your mental health challenges, it looks different for everybody. So you can literally custom make what that looks like for you. And I'll say one more thing and land my plane here. A lot of people, when we think about mental health, I think we always have the negative side of it. Mental health is just a state of mind. You also have positive mental health as well, right? And so I don't want to, leave this platform and not share that. Like, I know mental health challenges are a thing, but there is a such thing as positive mental health. And I think we should talk about that a little bit more in society and as we talk about mental health as well.
Question. I think I want to understand re-traumatization.
Yeah.
What is re-traumatization? How does that look like?
Okay. No. It can look in different ways. One of the shows I did for the Meadows before I transitioned away from them was a show called Recovery Replay, Sambaza. And one of the rules I had was you have to be in recovery for at least 3 years. Because there are people where it actually is too soon to tell the story, depending on who that person is, what they went through and stuff like that. And I can give you a prime example. I remember we had this thing called a growth summit, and we were trying to get people to tell their stories, if you will. And there was one person who I think was in recovery maybe 2 years, right? But whether it be 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, it can sometimes still be too early, right?
Mhm.
And so this person got up, started to tell their story, and in front of all these people got triggered right then and there. Now, for her, that trigger started looking like, was crying and sobbing and stuff like that. For other people, that re-traumas, that getting triggered could look like, going back to the bottle. It can look like sex
Mhm.
addiction. It can look like a myriad of things. It can look like acting out towards others. It can be acting out towards yourself. So that is a real thing. And that's one of those things where we tell people recovery is, it's a journey, right? It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? Once you come out the other side of your challenges or recovery or whatever, it's something you work every single day. There is no such thing as recovered in this space. That doesn't exist, right? It's one of those things where you're working on it every single day, right? You're working on it every single day. And so we try to get people to understand that so we can avoid Sambaza, those re-traumatizations or those triggerings, if you will, because they are a very real thing and they can do some serious damage if you don't handle that recovery responsibly.
Oh, good question.
And my next follow-up question, and for whoever is listening and watching, this is not a self-diagnosis, and this is not something that Dominic is not a professional, so he's just giving opinion. So do not use this information that we're going to talk about here as a remedy or consultation. So my
Absolutely.
next question is, I noticed, like, for something, like, say for example, you went and had a nice party, into a party, and then in the morning you have to leave the party, or you went to a club and you have to leave the club. There's that sense of you're gonna miss out, or you're gonna leave your friends and everybody's gonna go home. Or let's say you take a journey and visit your people, and after that there's that point where you're gonna say goodbye. You may not see them until maybe a month or a year or whatever time. Do you see that happening with someone who is going through mental health crisis or issues like that? Because at that point when they go seek help, and then you have so many, let's say you have 10 sessions, after you get to your ninth, you have that anxiety whereby now you're like, okay, when this is going to end, I am going to go back to where I was. Especially when you're, let's say, drinking, because that's a struggle. I'm assuming that.
Right. No, that's a very good question. We often talk to people on both of those shows, Beyond Theory and Recovery Replay, about the idea of that recidivism, that going back to those habits, if you will, right?
Mhm.
And that's one of those things where the therapist or whatever would ask them, like, hey, how are you going to stay recovered? I'll give you a classic example. We had a conversation with a gentleman called Scott Plum. Scott Plum was on season 2, episode 201 and 202. So the first 2 episodes of that season. And he, was in treatment for sex addiction, right? And, he went through treatment, 45-day treatment, did the work, great work, this, that, and the other. And in the last days of treatment, Dr. Carnes, the senior fellow who, is pretty prominent in the sex addiction world, he asked him, like, hey, you live in a world where, you travel a lot for business and you're, in and out of hotel rooms, and, you're going to be surrounded by women from time to time and fall back into those habits. Have you thought about retirement? Have you thought about retirement from that world, right? And that person and Scott really had to think about, like, man, I really love what I do. I'm great at what I do. But if I
Mhm.
really want to work my recovery, I should consider retiring. And he did. He did. And so to your question, Sambaza, like, again, when you work in your recovery, from what I've learned, and I'm not an active recovery. I'm literally just I'm not a clinician. I'm not an active recovery. It's just one of those things where I lead with empathy to tell these stories, to help tell these stories and share these stories with in an impassioned and passionate way. and to get these stories out, to get people to understand that recovery is for them. But he understood that he had to get away from that world. Otherwise, the likelihood of him, sliding back was pretty high. And so you have to work that recovery and be serious about it. I've heard countless stories that like people, and it sounds bad, but it's true. Like nothing is more important than my recovery. Not my wife, not my husband, not my kids. Like my recovery is more important, because if I can figure that part out, then everybody else will be okay. I'll be a better husband. I'll be a better wife. I'll be a better dad. I'll be a better mom. But that recovery is that important to that person. And it makes sense that it would be, because once that part is taken care of, and you understand that it's a marathon and not a sprint, and that you have to work it every single day, it starts to get easier and easier. So that slide back, Sambaza, is real, but it really speaks to the person in doing that work every single day.
Okay.
Definitely.
I have another question here regarding stories and experiences where you have a story that you have that has some profound impact on someone's mental health. Do you have any? I don't know if it's specific stories that you would tell that would come out, and somebody would go like, or the bulb would light up, and they'll be like, okay, this is it.
No, for sure. There's so many. There's so many. There's, I'll tell this story. So the way Recovery Replay works, right? When I wrote it in the place of, it's told from a person's journey is told from three different perspectives. So there's the person in recovery, there's their loved one. So it's like a spouse, best friend, child, or something like that. And then a clinician. And then we take all these interviews and wrap them into one comprehensive story. And one of those rules, Sambaza, that I have is that, let's say it's a husband-wife. Let's say the husband's in recovery and the wife, is a support person. They can't be in the same room when I interview them. Like, as a matter of fact, one of them has to leave the house, because I don't want like couched answers. I don't want like, I don't want to say fake answers, but you tend to kind of ease up when the other person's sitting right there, right? I'm trying to get this real answer. And so I did this particular interview, and I think it was with Chuck, with Chuck and his wife, Erin. And after the interview aired, Chuck came to me like, man, my wife was sharing stuff I didn't know she felt.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know she felt that stuff. We've been married for 20 plus years. I didn't know she felt any of that stuff until this interview came out.
Oh, wow.
And so it's one of those things where she started to feel heard because of that interview, right? Or I had another interview with Dina Harless and talking about her family and childhood trauma and stuff like that. And so while we had to reopen some of those wounds, it started a brand new dialogue after the episode came out. Like, you know what? I didn't know this about mom, and I didn't know you went through this, and I didn't know that was so traumatic for you. I thought you was just like, being a wimp or something like that. Like I'm starting to understand the impact, right? And so that is the power of storytelling, specifically with podcasting, right? And people in recovery and mental health, right? When you're able to sit and storyboard and draw out this narrative, and you add some, a music sound bed, and it invokes emotion, it really gets people to think and really gets people to feel what the other person is saying. And so, there has been countless emails, phone calls, text messages where somebody was like, man, I really thought I was the only one going through this. Like I thought I was the only one drinking myself under the bar. I thought I was the only one, experiencing this thing that, they call sex addiction. And I didn't know where to get help. I thought I was the only person who went through that type of childhood trauma. Like nobody has it as bad as me. And then you hear these stories and you're like, you know what? Maybe there is hope for me. This person just shared there was hope for me, for them. My story is not exactly the same, but it's similar. Let me go talk to somebody. Let me go to this website to see if I can get some help. Let me learn more about this thing. Let me go learn more about codependency. You're right. And then I remember another story where I think a lot of people think codependency is just like being codependent on something, when there's actually 5 different symptoms to codependency. And it's like stuff you didn't even really think of. Some of it is related to childhood trauma, right? And stuff like that. And so when we start to get phone calls about that, like, you know what? I don't have that codependent part, like the surface definition, but I definitely have 3, 4, and 5. Like that's spot on, right? And so you start to point out these things in a podcast form or whatever, or somebody giving their testimony, and people start to think about getting some help, going to talk to somebody. And so I think honestly, and that's why a lot of times you guys hear me talk about like not caring about downloads, right? And I'm not saying downloads aren't important, but like when I get an email or something like that means that's like 10,000, 20,000 downloads to me, right? Like it's impactful, right? It's impactful in a different way. It's impactful in the way it's supposed to be, because listen, we're out here trying to save lives, right? We're trying to save lives. We're not, obviously, we want people to listen. You want a certain download number and stuff like that, but we're trying to save lives. That's what's important here, because if we can just, get people to just talk about what's going on, right? And not just talk about what's going on, but we have to also talk about what's going on underneath. Yeah, you may be here for combat trauma from the military, but I need to understand what was going on when you was 5, 6, 7 years old. And the reason I bring up that example is because people may not notice it now, but 75% of people who are in military service, 75% of them come from homes with childhood trauma, right? And so a lot of people join the service. Maybe it was because they want to get some get back to somebody else and take that out on somebody else, or they have a strong sense of service because nobody showed up for them, right? Or maybe they just want to provide a better life for their family, right? Because the military has pretty decent benefits, right? From time to time. So like this world of mental health and behavioral health, it's tricky. It really is. But I think when you're able to have this storytelling aspect and make that impact, it's everything. That is the work. That's the work.
Okay. I thought of a question to share. We've talked about with some of our prior guests the stigma of addressing your issues or your concerns with your mental health, and especially in maybe the African American community, the stigma may be more prevalent than others. Did you see a disparity in the people who were coming in with what you work with, the people you worked with?
That's a great question. And while that stigma is very prevalent in the African American community, the prevalence is not exclusive to us.
Okay.
And I know, and that's the thing, right? That's one of the things I applaud the Meadows for allowing me to dive into that. Because I say, listen, like in my community, I need to break through this idea that like therapy is for white people. Like I need to break through that, right? Because, or the fentanyl crisis only affects white people, or the opioid crisis only affects white people. And I'm here to tell you, kiddos, that ain't true. Like in doing the research for Beyond Theory, you pull them CDC numbers and you see that like people from 65 up, who are, Black men 65 and up are the fastest rising when it comes to fentanyl abuse, or like how it's affecting young people at a large rate from people who look like us. But the stigma of getting help, like I said, is exclusive to us. Oh, you're Catholic. No, you don't go to therapy. Oh, you're from the Midwest and white, from rural. No, you don't go get help. You work hard, you buckle that shit down, and you keep it moving. Right? Like, oh, you're Asian. No. You work hard, you this and the other. Asian, that is that white people stuff. No, you don't do that. Or you're Native American. Like, no, like we come from strong people. We don't go to therapy. Like, no, that's not gonna happen. So like that stigma, while it is prevalent to us and we're in the Black community, so we know that's a thing, it's not exclusive to us. It's like everybody feels this stigma to get help for some reason, right? Like it
Mm.
almost like it's a sense of weakness, is a sense of whatever. I think the bigger issue is the fact that mental health challenges is a thing. Now, we've come a long way from the 60s, 70s, and 80s and stuff like that, right? But we still have a long ways to go. And so I think the bigger issue is the not the getting help part, but the fact that mental health challenges is even a thing. Like that's the part
Mhm.
we have to fight first, right? So no, like again, when I pulled those CDC numbers for research, it's alarming, and it's alarming across the board. So again, if you're in the Black community and you think that opioid stuff is only affecting white people, I'm here to tell you it ain't. It's hitting us hard too, right? Now,
Yeah.
one of the things I will like to point out is that like some of that opioid crisis is starting, like the tide is stemming a little bit, like it's starting to slow down, but unfortunately, it's slowing down in communities that don't look like us. And so
Mm.
again, there's the issue of us not being seen in that light, right? You
Okay.
know, we still have to fight through this aspect of, you know, if it's a white person using, then they were just a troubled teenager, right? As opposed to a Black person using, then oh no, they was a criminal and we got to defame them and this and like that's still a thing, right? And
Mhm.
their pictures in the newspapers darker than everybody else's and stuff like that. So like there are still challenges, and it does cut across race lines. But just the idea of getting help, that stigma, it cuts across race, socioeconomic, you know, statuses. It cuts across sex. It cuts across all that. It cuts across all of it.
Oh wow, that was a great way that you put it, with all those different cultures that you just laid out. That everybody um, deals with that. Yeah.
Right, right. It's like, and like I said, like they all have a different excuse,
Mm.
right? And I don't want to
Hmm.
say excuse, but they all have a different saying as to why that is, right? And it's no
Hmm.
different than in the Black community as well. It's just our justification or excuse or whatever is just different. But the idea that the stigma is there, it cuts across. No matter what you look like, where you come from, who you love, all the above.
Definitely.
And I want to add this. So when I was growing up, uh, seeking therapy was considered, first of all, it was considered a Western idea. It was not an African idea. Uh, but this is not to say that as Africans we do not have our way of grieving and our way of seeking therapy. We had different methods. Have I gone to look around for it? No. But we stuck with the idea of having somebody who gets paid to listen to your issues as being something westernized. I do remember a situation where there was a calamity in Kenya one time, and there was a well-known therapist who came out there to tell people, there's trauma that comes with this thing. Don't just look at it as, oh, it was the bombing. Um, there was a bombing in somewhere in the U.S. embassy in Kenya, and people didn't realize that. And at that moment in time, it now started becoming an issue where people did seek therapy and find out what was going on with having these issues, behind traumatic, tragic events. And then it morphed into realizing that, you know what, there is something to be looked at there. Therapy is not something that you have to be bananas, to be able to go seek help. You are
Absolutely.
just a
Hmm.
normal person that can go out there and seek help. And shout outs to Dr. Njenga. He is the one who's the pioneer of this and made sure that people did actually seek therapy. And it is actually something that we are looking at seriously.
Yeah.
So you said it's not in terms of like you said, black, white, yeah, African, depend socioeconomic reasons, geo spaces where you are, all that. So yeah, it is an issue, and how we look at it is also something that has to be looked at differently, whether
Right.
it's
Mhm.
whichever part of the world you're in.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's three things that came up for me just now when you was talking, Sambaza. One is this idea of going. I want to go back to grief for a second, because I think a lot of times when we talk about grief, we think of it in the sense of losing somebody that we love. But you can grieve just about anything. And the reason I was thinking about that when you was talking about Kenya and Africa and stuff like that, I had on a clinician who talked about moving from India to the West, right, to the States, and how she was, grieving not being home, right? So you can actually grieve not, leaving where you come from. You can grieve a loss of a job. You can grieve the fact that, like, a myriad of things, right? So I think I definitely wanted to talk about that, and that's what came up for me just now. That, like, you could grieve, and it doesn't have to be like the loss of life. It can be something else, right? We've had some people, who I remember having someone who was older on a show, and they were grieving at the fact of, like, they don't have sexual urges anymore. Like, you can grieve that, like, having sex in this and years is a natural, healthy thing that we all as humans like to do, right? And so not having that urge to want to do that, like, you can grieve that. So, like, you can grieve in a number um, of ways. The second thing is you were talking about is this idea, like, it doesn't have to be something acute to go talk to somebody, right? There's this, one of the things I learned, doing this work is the idea of big T trauma and small T trauma, right? And so big T trauma is this idea of, like, maybe there's a bombing, like you were saying earlier, or maybe you was in a car accident, or maybe something like that, right? Like, that's big T trauma. But the small T trauma is like the small things, like maybe somebody made a face at you, called you a name, stuff like that. That stuff adds up. It may be small on the surface on the beginning, but that stuff adds up. And so sometimes you just have to get that fine tune. Like, hey, I don't really like when people, say this about me. Like, I don't like when people touch my hair. I know that's something in the Black community, especially Black women, that comes up from time. Like, I don't want nobody to touch my hair. I want to, be looked at a certain way. Like, those are those things that are kind of talked about as small T traumas, if you
Mhm.
will. And the last thing is, I'll say this. I talked to somebody who was saying that, like, when you have anxiety or depression, it's often just a warning sign. It's very much akin to, like, your car's check engine light, right? When the check engine light comes on, like, okay, I need to go get this checked out. So when you have an anxiety episode or a depressive episode, sometimes that's the check engine light. Like, I need to check in with myself. And if it's real bad, maybe I need to check in with somebody else, like a therapist or something like that. Or if for some reason you can't afford a therapist or something like that, and you just need somebody to talk to, this is something I share with people all the time. Call or text 988. It's 24/7, 365. It's part, opened by the federal government like a year and a half ago. And there's a counselor you can just talk to, right? Tell them what you got going on, this, that, and the other. So it is, and it is discreet. It's confidential. Like, nobody's going to, like, call you or something like that. So it's one of those things where it should be an avenue for you to use.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Do you want to go through the comments?
Yeah, go ahead. You want me to do it?
I can see them. Let me see if I can go back. I'm used to it.
Here.
Oh,
Scorpion. Hey, Scorpion.
hey, what's up? She says, hey, y'all. And all right, this word, because the use of word shrink is pervasive, derogatory. Yeah, it says right because this.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It
it's
doesn't
very derogatory.
help. It definitely doesn't help. Like, again, we're trying to save lives, right? And stuff like that is just, it's counterintuitive.
So to say you see a therapist, then sometimes the reply is, "Oh, you see a shrink," and it's unfortunate the stigma.
And I think
Mhm.
that's why I do the work that I do when it comes to podcasting, right? Like, and to break through these words and that and the other. And I get it, right? Like we're trying to, again, when it comes to taking mental health seriously, whatever, and that's why we have the Mental Health Parity Act, where mental health challenges and stuff like that can be treated just as much, and be taken just as serious as physical ailments, right? And
Right.
so again, when you're talking about us being open to this idea of mental health challenges, behavioral health challenges over the past 30, maybe 40 years, right? We're still trying to combat hundreds, thousands of years of stigma and stuff like that. So this is just going to take time, right? But I think through podcasting, through storytelling, through people telling their stories, sharing those testimonies, that is how we combat that. The more and more people telling their stories. That's why I appreciate celebrities and athletes. Like, listen, I'm struggling. Like Kevin Love talking about, I'm struggling, right? Simone Biles, like, listen, I'm struggling, right? The last thing we need Simone Biles doing is having a depressive moment or challenge, and she's on the balance beam, right? Like that can be a serious issue. So I appreciate that, that more and more people are coming out and sharing their stories. I would like to share somewhat of a warning, because I think sometimes trauma becomes trendy. And so everybody, kind of shares their story. And I'm okay with that, right? But I think just be mindful of the power of the tongue, and that, like, sometimes we don't want to glorify and trendize trauma to the sense of like it's cool to have trauma, right? And I think sometimes that kind of comes across, right? Like I know Meg Thee Stallion had the album Traumazine, right? A while back, right? And so it's like you're trying to, you want people to be advocates, but you don't want it to turn trendy to where it's like a fad and it's a cool thing, because like this is serious stuff, right? And so I just hope that people are just mindful of that as they share their story.
Definitely. Okay. A few other.
Let's go ahead with the comments.
Okay. This one.
Bad community neighborhood, like it's meant to happen to them because of that neighborhood. Get that one. So Scorpion says, I'm glad that people are becoming more comfortable talking about mental health. It helps people feel more free, comfortable getting help.
Absolutely. That, like I said, that's how we fight the stigma. Go ahead, Sambaza. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I was in a group of Kenyans, and this Kenyan man said, I cannot go to a therapist because I don't see myself sitting down with a stranger paying him money for him to tell me what my problems are. And he flatly refused. And at that moment, I was thinking and saying, okay, how can we help him? How can we change his mind? But I just realized that, you have to get to a point of self-actualization where you realize that I cannot do it by myself. I need help. And that's the point where you now go out and seek therapy for whatever issue you have. And one more thing I wanted to add, you notice that I said bananas. I didn't use the word mental. I watched on a show that said this guy was talking about kids who had mental health, and this guy kept on referring to people who their mental health was not at its best. But when he commented and said, don't use the other word, use bananas. And yeah, I think that has stuck with me. And I think I'm more comfortable using it like that, because it deflects from it. Even though it's a serious issue, it deflects off of it and makes it a bit more not stigmatizing the whole concept of mental health.
I can see that. I can see that, but I will say at the same time is like sometimes, and I've seen therapists do it where you have to be, you have to kind of provide that tough love a bit, because like you can only placate and coddle for so long, right? Like I do love the approach and I understand the intention, but I think sometimes it's just one of those things like we got to find a balance from like doing that part, but also getting real as well. And the thing is about therapists, I mean, like they're not really a people who are telling you what your problems are. They're really more so people who are guiding you through these challenges and just holding up a mirror, right?
Mhm.
Like they can only go by what you're telling them, right? And so they're just trying to help you walk through some stuff. It's no difference than a tax advisor, right? Like when you're trying to go through your taxes or whatever, it's like, trying to crunch these numbers. That's what a therapist is, a therapist is for, for what you have going on. So, but, that's kind of just what I wanted to add.
Definitely. Wanted you to speak about community. I think that's something that has come up a lot lately. Community in different circles, or and you hear it often, even in the workplace and things like that. You mentioned earlier how isolation, can be harmful to someone's mental health, and so. Speak on how storytelling as far as community can support someone's mental health that may be going through.
No, absolutely. You're in a in a group or a tribe, if you will, of like-minded people who have a somewhat not exactly the same, but a shared experience, right? People who understand what you're going through, right? And that's why I try my best to go to many like alumni events and things like that, not just for my purposes, so I can learn this that, and the other, but to understand the language and stuff like that. And so when you're around people who have this shared experience, they really do just help. They really can sometimes. Hey, I remember when you said this. Let's go through that sometimes. And sometimes you'll see like this kind of cold therapy session happening amongst themselves. And that's one of the reasons why many people who are in recovery become clinicians, behavioral health technicians themselves, or become psychotherapists and stuff like that, because they totally get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They totally understand what you're going through, and so they can definitely help, right? And so I think, gosh, I don't know what the number is. It has to be like over 80% of people who've gone through recovery or whatever are now clinicians or psychologists or social workers or something to that regard, because they get it. They absolutely get it. So community can not only be life saving but game changing.
Can
Thank you.
the barbershop play a role in creating mental health awareness?
Absolutely. I've seen many barbershops, especially in the Black community, where they purposely make it part of the experience, right? Where you'll have like this check-in, if you will, right? And we're starting to see more and more Black barbershops do exactly that, where you have this check-in and you say, hey, what you got going on? How was your week? How was your past 2 weeks? Some of us got it like that, where you can get a haircut every week. Not all of us are independently wealthy like that. So every other week or every week or whatever, like, hey, how was your week? What you got going on? Just talk about it, right? And some I've seen like those barbershops actually become clinicians themselves, or therapists as well, so counselors themselves. So it's a beautiful thing to see. But yeah, I actually talked about that in my racial trauma episode, racial trauma within the Black community, where barbershops were leading that, helping to lead that fight of fighting that stigma and just talking to people. And maybe they can't solve those problems, but at the very least you get it out in the open, and maybe you can have a community to kind of help you in that regard. So yeah, definitely barbershops can be a tool in that regard.
And as the lady in the circle, I definitely have to say that the salon, definitely, our hairstylist definitely serves as a counseling session sometimes. Come to
Absolutely.
Jesus. Yeah. So I just want to say that.
When you think about the history of the barbershop, it is often this hub, right? It's a hub for mental health, is a hub for all these types of things, right? So sorry, I think some people are kind of coming in, so it might get a little loud. So, but yeah, go for it.
Mm-hmm. But so what are other places that have would help out in mental health awareness? I know I did go to clinic, not clinic, but it was a talk just the other day hosted by Dr. Morrow. Um, she's actually
Hmm.
from California. She has a book, a play, and I think she said there's a film coming out with regard to that. But the talk was great. I wish she had it somewhere where we could listen to. But a church is another avenue, and I wanted to ask about that precisely because of the Black community. I noticed that that's where people seek help. You know, they use God, and I think even the white community does the same. They use God and that as one of that. Could you speak on it, or and also if you can add others? Now, the hair salon, Jen, that one, I think you can also give us more information regarding how it does help us to create mental health awareness as well.
Well, believe it or not, right? Like so often the church, the synagogue or the temple or whatever are often the front line person when it comes to mental health because like again, that's usually the person who is referred to um uh as like that lead therapist, if you will. Like I mean, think about when you have things going on in your life, you often go to that clergy member, right? You go to that pastor, you go to that rabbi for that help. So the place of worship is often that place that does that. But there's definitely others, right? Like I've seen the coffee shop in Chicago where this guy who was, a hip hop artist, and he opened a coffee shop where he can talk about these behavioral health challenges. Like a lot of times we have more people in schools who are doing this sort of work, if you will. So yeah, there's definitely tons of places that are opening up and trying to break that stigma when it comes to mental health.
Awesome. And then Sambaza, before let's see. I definitely want you to share about your podcast, Dominic, as we round out our conversation. Any other thoughts, Sambaza, before we have Dominic share about his podcast?
Um, my thoughts are, or maybe you can share some thoughts regarding the future about mental health awareness. I know next month is actually men's health, mental health awareness. So could you talk
Mm-hmm.
about that and what the future is in store?
I think the future is just continue to doing that work, right? To continue to tell these stories, have people feel open and comfortable with telling their story, and just bringing them to the forefront and understanding and letting them know that there is somebody you can talk to. You can talk to a therapist, or you can call and text 988 to do that work. Again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's free, confidential. Nobody's going to ask you for your phone number or anything like that. You can, like I said, you can call or text. But I think honestly, that's just the work right now, and just continue to break through the noise, break through that stigma that like, hey, you're going through something upstairs, right? Like, and it is quite all right to talk to somebody, acknowledge it, and engage it. It really is. And so that's just kind of where I see the future now. Like I said, like we're starting to kind of turn the corner like the past 30, 40 years. But we got like hundreds and hundreds of years to combat with, misconceptions and myths and things that are just flat out wrong, right? And with and honestly, social media really ratchets this up even more when you're talking about, body image issues and things like that, right? So, and understanding that like, again, everybody's body type is okay, right? And trying to fight through that. So it's one of those things where all the platforms are welcomed as long as they're sharing a very positive mental health message, and because we have to again fight through the noise a lot of times.
All right. And question. Now, like I said, men's mental health awareness comes next month. Do men really struggle so much in terms of acceptance of their mental health crisis? So I'm putting it lightly, but it is a sensitivity because you're told act like a man, don't behave like a and then you're told, you have to be of a certain um, caliber to
Right.
distinguish yourself as a man or in success or other things. How would you equate that with our society today? Are they going to make any changes, or are we making any changes on that? And if you can speak on it as well.
No, we are. We're coming a long way. This idea of like man up and men don't cry and this that, and the other. We are coming out the other side of this, but there's a lot of work to do. Right. For example, I talked to a clinician who gave one of her patients this assignment to keep a diary, right? And he's like, no, man, don't keep diaries. I'll keep a journal, but I won't keep a diary. So like that's where we are now, right? It's like those little battles that we have to come over, the other side of, like just that, like, or they don't want to say I have a therapist or that I see to. I have a coach. I got a life coach, right? So again, those are just some of those challenges when it comes to men that we have to get over that hump. And we really are. We are making an impact, but it's going to take time. It's going to take time, right? And this idea of man up and men don't cry, this and the other, it's just silly. It just is. Like we have emotions as well, right? And it should be okay to be in a safe space to share those emotions.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Sambaza, do you have other thoughts? I definitely want to be respectful of Dominic's time.
I am seeing a comment here saying balance on grace and tough love. Is what Paula was saying.
1000%.
Yeah. So I think that's
1000%.
yeah, like you said, 100%.
For sure.
Now, Dominic, here we go. This is your turn to tell us where we can find you. You got a lot of things going on, so there you go. Take it away.
Absolutely. So again, just want to say thank you, Jen, so much for having me on. Sambaza, you're always an amazing host. Thank you so much for having me to the platform. Name's Dominic Lawson. You can find me on Instagram at The Real Dominic Lawson. I have multiple podcasts that I manage and have created and all the things. But as it relates to Mental Health Awareness Month, those two are Beyond Theory, where I talk to behavioral health clinicians about kind of a rip from the headlines, Law and Order style show, but only referring to mental health and things of that nature, where we talk about sex addiction, we talk about racial trauma, we talk about all those sort of things. And in addition to that, my show that I created, Recovery Replay, where it tells the story of a person's recovery from 3 different perspectives: a person in recovery, the loved one, and the clinician. And so that those two are both award-winning shows that we're very proud of in that regard. And then there is my baby, Black is America, that I am currently working on. A new episode should be out in a few days. Had to do a bit of a rewrite because I came across some new information. That's the thing about when you're a nerd for Black history, man. Like you hear some information, like, oh, I gotta put it in there. So do a slight of a rewrite. So that'll be out in a few days and stuff like that. But outside of that, I'm just working on new projects. I think, as it relates to Mental Health Awareness Month, I think I definitely want to do like a limited series about sex addiction, because sex addiction is one of those things where people don't think it's a real thing. It absolutely is. The World Health Organization says it is. We're still trying to fight to get it in the DSM-5, and this is just the big book that says that, like, what is covered by insurance, what is sex addiction and stuff like that. So definitely want to get the stigma that, like, it is a real thing. Anything that any type of processing order that forces you to kind of miss work, it disrupts your life, and just being a human being is a disorder, right? And so sex addiction can be one of those things. So I thinking about doing a limited series on that to kind of help in that regard. And those are kind of the things I got working on. I got other podcast ideas that I'm working on. A lot of them are mental health related. And so we'll see what the future holds when it comes to that.
Awesome. And then the B Word is a podcast that you
Absolutely. That is my wife's show, The B Word, where I just read the latest script that's going to be coming out this coming week
Oh,
as
great.
well. And so that is my wife's show, The B Word, where we redefine what, the B word is. A lot of times when it comes to women, we think is as that word, but it can mean bold, brave, beautiful, blessing, all those type of things. And so that's also a show that I work on greatly with my wife.
Awesome. Awesome. And I have listened to the B Covery Replay and Beyond Theory, and they're really great shows. That was really great work that you did there. I
I appreciate
mean,
that.
it had potential to be like almost a television program or something. I mean, like or a film or something. Really great work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There may be a season 3 of Recovery Replay. We're still trying to work on some stuff and get the numbers right, but Recovery Replay actually may be coming back. So we'll see. We'll
Okay,
see.
definitely. Because your reach and, just being able to help people in that way is, definitely significant and nothing to sneeze at.
Like I said, we're trying to save lives.
For
That's what's important
sure.
here. Trying to save lives.
For
Definitely.
me, for me, I just want to have more Black is America, so that I can give my kids to listen to all the time. Dominic, I always make a fuss about that. The more they
I
are, the
know.
more my kids can actually listen to, because it's great storytelling. And I tell people, if you want to listen to great storytelling, um, go up there and listen to it. It's amazing, amazing.
I
Good work.
can I can say that you can very much anticipate more episodes of Black is America coming soon, more than you have in the past. So
Okay.
they're on the way. They're on the way.
Look at
Thank
that.
you, thank you, thank you. For a man
Wow.
who thought he was gonna retired, you know.
Yeah.
There are more on the way. I promise. Like I
All right,
said,
thank you.
I've already started writing the one after the one I'm rewriting now. So they're on the way.
Thank you.
Cool. And then a couple more comments, Basil, you want to
Sure. Paula is saying this should be making sense. That's about the mental health. Then Scorpion says PBS. She's probably talking
So
about.
she's talking about
Go ahead.
Black is America. So Scorpion, she always said that like Black is America is the new Eyes on the Prize, or at least should be.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
which is high praise, right? But Scorpion has always said that, and I've always appreciate her speaking life in the Black is America like that. But yeah, we'll see what we do. We'll see what we can do.
And Paula says,
And while Scorpion's getting me about Black is America, Paula has been on my ass about the B word. Like she really has. Like, where's the next episode, Dominic? She's like, you sit up here reading scripts. You're supposed to be producing episodes. So it's on the way, Paula. I promise. I read the new script. It's really good. It's on the way. I promise.
All right. And then this is a good one.
Lawson's a killing
The
the game.
Lawson's killing the game.
We're trying. We're trying. We're definitely trying.
It's about time. And she says, I'm
Oh,
always against of that show. And I'm pretty sure we're all talking about it. Black is America.
She's talking about
I
Black
think
is
Dominic,
America.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
here. There's,
Yeah.
it's that, I don't know. Dominic, you gotta, it's like, is this what you started? You don't know what you started. And I told you this before. You don't know what you started, but you cannot stop it.
Clearly.
It's got to
Clearly.
be in.
Listen, I legitimately made Black as America as a portfolio builder, right? Like as the way to say, like, I know how to do that style of show, but because without Black as America, there's no Recovery Replay and there's no Beyond Theory the way it was restructured, right? And so Black as America has done what it was supposed to do, but now it's doing what I didn't ask it to do. And so, because I remember talking to a much older Black woman, and I was talking about ending Black as America. Like, no, you're not. Like, but I need it. No, you're not. And I was just like, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Look at that.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we definitely support you and the family and all of your endeavors. And
Thank you so much.
please give Miss Lawson our love and support.
Will do.
Yeah, we'll be listening and watching, and you support, so we will be right there.
Absolutely.
Bring you guys on.
And I love what you guys are doing with Woke by Accident and Team Up in this regard. I think you guys are doing amazing work, and I want you to know that I appreciate the work that you do, because I know it's a lot of work, but just know that you have a fan in me, and I appreciate you and I support you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Definitely. And Paula says, thank you for this conversation. Shout out to Paula.
Paula's going to text me in a few minutes. Now get your ass and work and make the new B word. Watch. She's going to text me as soon as it's over. She's going to say that. Watch.
Who cares? Paula is on it, okay? Not too long ago. What was that? A couple hours ago, she was doing lives, and she's probably working on something right now. So we're just all, in the lab working on stuff. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
that's what we do.
Sure. That's what we do. Exactly. It is. All right. Any other thoughts, Sambaza?
My thoughts are that whatever we've learned today, you've summarized everything of what we need to go into, especially now that we're going into Men's Mental Health Awareness next month. And then there's Juneteenth as well. All these encompassing together, because it also has something to do with us, the Black man. I know the previous month we were talking about women's health, and then went into sports, and went into also self-care and working out. I guess this time now we're going to look at the men, and also Juneteenth, and also Dominic. I guess Dominic has started it off well for the next month.
Okay, and then it's also Black Music Month, so we may have some pop culture content. Actually, I think our next episode might be a pop culture kind of fun with Black Music Month approaching. So
very nice.
Stay tuned for that. All right, and okay. Sounds great. Well, everyone, please check out Dominic's content. We will have those links posted in the show notes. Audio episode will be up very soon, but definitely can check out the replay of this visual episode. We appreciate all you guys for checking us out. Shout out to the chat who has been engaging with us this evening. Thank you so much. And those just tuning in, we appreciate you. Heart is so full that you guys are really receiving this information. And, we're really sincere about it. So we appreciate you receiving that. Dominic, any other thoughts?
No, go subscribe to Work by Accident.
Okay. Thank you. We was free to say that, if you've made it this far, please subscribe, tell a friend, share. Maybe something that was said was impactful to you. We would love to hear about it, and, pass the word on and share that out for sure. So we appreciate you guys. Please stay tuned for more engaging content, and we look forward to continuing these important conversations. So with that, we will... He's waving the flag, guys. All right. And Dominic, stay so that we can give you our proper goodbye. But you guys take care. At this time, we're going to go ahead and conclude the episode. We greatly appreciate you listening. We invite you to follow us on social media. On Instagram, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. On Twitter, it is Woke by. On Facebook, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. We also have the new website up, www.wokebyaccident.net. Please check us out. And also follow us on all of your favorite streaming platforms. And please leave a review and share feedback. You can also reach out by Gmail, wokebyaccident@gmail.com. And every time you listen, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for listening, and take care.